Hello, everyone. I hope that we're all having a wonderful day. Thank you for being patient with us here in San Diego. My name is Allison, and I am the content manager at Abacus. Today, we will be teaching you some great tips and tricks for AbacusLaw. Before we begin, here's a few housekeeping notes. Please feel free to type in questions throughout the webinar, and we'll answer them in the order that they were received. This is going to be about a 15-minute presentation with a 15-minute Q&A. Thank you for attending our first free training Friday. Please allow me to introduce our presenter today, Tomas Soros. He is our Chief Solutions Architect. Tomas applies his legal, technical, and business acumen to achieve workflow automation requirements for clients. He leads the sales engineering team at Abacus, and if you haven't met him in person yet, he's a real snazzy dresser. So please welcome Tomas.
Hi, everyone. First off, I want to thank you for attending, and maybe without further ado, I'll jump right in to the tips and tricks of AbacusLaw. We'll have a Q&A at the end, and between now and then. So what I've done so far is gone to the help menu and selected keyboard shortcuts. This gives me quick access to a short list of keyboard shortcuts. The keyboard shortcuts are great because they help achieve what I'm always looking to do, which is to minimize the number of clicks that are required to get from, to perform the action that I need to perform in the program. An example is date field. So in the program, if you're in any date field in Abacus, clicking T on your keyboard jumps to today's date. I use that almost every day. It's an excellent way to make sure that I'm able to enter information without any kind of date picker or type in the numbers I need to do. Other examples are adding clicking plus or minus. Plus or minus on the keyboard will move forward one day or backwards one day. Seems like a small function, but it's actually extremely helpful in not needing to kind of do the date map in your head or pull up that date picker. Other useful tools with T. If T is today, W is a week. So if you want to move 1 week forward or 1 month forward is N. So T and N and W and even Y for a year are great ways of helping navigate and helping enter good information into those fields of numbers. Another thing that's great, and I use this as well, is Shift T, or actually Shift M, or Shift W. This moves back in time. So if you want to move, 3 months forward, you click M. Shift M will move a month back. So it's a nice way of giving shortcuts, or having shortcuts, that give you the ability to enter the right information into your date field without with a minimal number of clicks. Second thing I want to point out and I urge you all to take a look at the shortcut list in its entirety, but F2, an example, which opens a note timer. The reason I like that is because it truly gives you in AbacusLaw, without needing to kind of reach for the mouse at any point, it really is a start date timer. So with the click of F2 on your keyboard, you open up the note timer, and you can actually configure it in the settings to start tracking time automatically. So this is to the point where one-click time tracking is available to me. And the click means that I don't have to reach for the mouse. If I'm typing, I can just stay on the keyboard and click F2 to get that functionality. So those keyboard shortcuts are available to you. It's in the help menu at all times. Another thing, for the next thing that I'd like to touch on, in a similar vein, it has to do with access to help within the program. So if you go to the help menu, that certainly is helpful. You can access the content, which is our online, updated, searchable help. But another thing I like is within the program, within your matters, and within your calendar, and within all the records that you have available to you, you'll notice oftentimes a button with a question mark. Now the F1 key can also launch this, or at any time you see this button, you can click it. One, I think it's most useful because it's not just access to general help in the system, but it's actually context-sensitive help. So where I am in Abacus, when I click F1 or when I click that question mark button, gets me to this online guide already focused and presenting to me information that's specific to where I was in the program. So I think this is invaluable, where you're never kind of lost or on your own, or you're not kind of dumped into an overall help guide where your search for the right information is just starting. Instead, it's a shortcut from the right place in the program to the right information you need to get the most out of that function. So it's F1 or clicking on that question mark. It's a nice way to get to this help guide, including the ability to print any specific pages that you might need, or print them as a PDF and have them as a handy reference on your desktop. It's a nice way of learning the program, or I use it a lot to help clients use parts of the program that they maybe have not been utilizing as much. They're aware of it, but being able to kind of have that context-sensitive, guided help can be extremely valuable. So there's a couple things I wanted to start with, and they are focused maybe on built-in help and the information that you might need about where you are in the program and how you might be able to gain some benefit from it. I also did want to show you in the help guide itself the other resources section. I think this is valuable because it's a nice way to get quick access to webinars such as this one, or our regularly scheduled training webinars and training videos that are available 24/7 and specific to features and functionality within the program. And of course the knowledge base. The knowledge base is also helpful because it can break down specific ways to get to an end result in maybe a little more granular detail than the overall help guide. Right? So I want to point those kind of resources and other resources available to you. They're available to you today. I recommend maybe after the webinar, if there's ever a section of the program that you wanted to know more about, or you just want to make sure that you have kind of a comprehensive understanding of, open that record, go to that location in the program, and that help button is there available to you to make sure that you're getting the information you need specific to that feature or function in the program. Okay. The next thing I wanted to touch on is specific to a question that came up as we were kind of researching, for this webinar, and it has to do with kind of personalizing Abacus in some ways. And the specific question had to do with adding firm logos to invoices. So oftentimes when you're presenting to a client, a custom setup for the firm in accounting, if you go to File, Setup, and Company Preferences, you're able to select an image that you have for the firm's logo. Now, oftentimes I help firms, if you have one handy, that's certainly helpful. If it's available on your website, being able to kind of grab that as an image. In the Abacus Accounting Company Preferences, the logo bitmap that you select and kind of find that file on your system is a nice way of being able to personalize your invoices and have your firm's logo and other information presented in a consistent way, in an easy enough function of selecting the bitmap, adding it to your your accounting settings, and then Abacus applying that logo to all invoices going forward. Okay, so that was one of the questions as a tip and trick to customize and have a nice professional look and feel to your invoices. And also one other thing I want to touch on, it does have to be a bitmap, and there are programs that are available to help you very quickly create that file type of any logo image file that you have. There's a knowledge base article in exactly how to create that bitmap, and also the bitmap should be 1 inch by 1 inch. So there are also programs in the knowledge base can kind of help you determine how to create the logo image file that then you apply and use going forward on all your invoices. Okay, so that was one that came up. Another aspect or feature, tip and trick that I wanted to point out goes to automation, which is dear to my heart. So if I'm in the Abacus program and I'm accessing a note or an event or any of these memo fields where I capture information, we have a text macro system in the program that can help enter information that you may want to enter consistently. And the way that functions is to create these macros and then be able to type, instead of a full description of that information, you're able to type from your list of macros, right? So I've created macros, an example being CC. I just need to type CC and hit space as a way of entering that description. This can be very helpful in doing time entries, because there can be codes or descriptions that you use that are consistent. I often recommend that if there's like kind of a prefix to the description where it puts in a consistent language that you might want to use, certainly makes your bills easier to read because it can kind of itemize and give descriptions in a consistent way. But we call those text macros, and they're available in the Abacus program. You can call them up, you can create your own, and then when you're using them, it's a straightforward process of entering the code and hitting space to enter that description. So those are text macros, and that goes to the automation, right? The automation of entering consistent text. And then, of course, you can continue to type after it with more specificity about maybe the content, the topic of that phone call that you're entering as a timed activity, and of course that can become a billable activity as well. Okay. The next question that came up, and I thought this was important because it also goes to automation within the Abacus program. And it has to do with, and really the question was, is Abacus, the program, capable of adding or assigning unique identification numbers to both client records and case files in the system? And the short answer is yes, but I'm rarely satisfied with the short answer. So my longer answer is, not only yes, can you have the system auto-increment based on the last number used for a matter or for a name, but even within different types of matters or different names, you can create a prefix where maybe a client has, whatever kind of syntax you might do, or a case file, whether it's the, maybe it's the year or the type of case or something like that. So as you create those kind of consistent syntax starting elements of the file number or the client ID number, Abacus will then increment based on the last number used in that syntax. And the way you set that up is in Abacus, you go to File, Setup, File Setup, System Options, and you're able in the General section to either check or uncheck whether you'd like Abacus to automatically increment your name's ID based on the last number used, or also increment case file number. So a case file is really your matter numbers, and the names ID are for the contacts that you enter. So that is a straightforward way, an easy way to initialize or to get Abacus to increment those numbers. Now, if you uncheck them, it gives you the ability to kind of add your own numbers in a kind of a free way. So it really comes down to the need, but I think the question really came up is, or the desire was to have the system keep track of numbers and assign them in a unique way. So that is, a capability of the system, and in the system options general setting is where you can kind of initialize that, for the firm. Okay. So yeah, so that had to do with ID numbers. I'm going to circle back to an original question that came up, and it had to do, and bear with me, that if this is repetitive, it can kind of help make that information that more useful for you. But the first thing we touched on in the webinar had to do with the help menu. And I point that out because it has a number of functions. One, it's quick access to the entire kind of reference guide, help guide to the program with, search and other functions and a nice index for you. But the thing I touched on was keyboard shortcuts. Keyboard shortcuts are an invaluable way within the program to get to the end result with the fewest number of clicks possible. That's always my goal, is to really give you tools that help you automate data entry or automate access to information, or however, as much as possible getting information in the cleanest form, and then being able to kind of use it in your reports and records and things like that. So I pulled up the keyboard shortcuts because this is a comprehensive list of the tools you have already available to you. And it's everything from the Control-C to copy and Control-V to paste that we're familiar with, but there are additional elements to the shortcut keys that I think are extremely helpful. And the first one has to do with date fields in the program. So if you're in Abacus and you have a date field, let's say it's a filing date or statute of limitations deadline or something like that, or the date it was opened, for instance, or closed. If you click into a date field and you hit T on your keyboard, it will populate that field with today's date, pulled from your system settings, right? So that's a nice way of automating entry of a date value into a field in Abacus. Building on that, if T enters today's date, a plus in the keyboard will move one day forward, and a minus will move one day back. Building on that, if you use the M key, it'll move forward 1 month, If you Shift M, it'll move 1 month backwards. So those date field shortcuts, I think, are a helpful way of being able to enter information into any of the date fields that you have in Abacus, and then control very quickly how you need to move. You kind of navigate in time forward or backwards. So T enters today's date, plus minus can move forward a day, back a day. M is for month, Shift M is back a month, W is for week, Y is for year. So we all use date fields a lot. Managing time and kind of, workflow and life cycle milestones are important. And those date field shortcuts are an extremely useful way to very quickly enter information and then manage it within those fields. The other thing I touched on was the note timer and F2. And I'll jump back to the Abacus program to cover that as well. As F2 basically means that with a single click, I can, on the keyboard, without needing to reach for my mouse, I can actually open a note timer. I have it configured to start my timer automatically. But this is, in Abacus, the very quickest way to get to the point where your time, the system knows who you are as kind of, as a credentialed user. It has the date and time assigned to it. It can be automatically connected with the case you're working on, or I can, change that association at any point. But the F2 keyboard shortcut was one I did want to call out as a very efficient and effective way of getting to the point where you are tracking your time as a user in Abacus associated with the case file you're working on with one click. Okay. The next step that I wanted to touch on has to do, tip and trick wise, with the dashboard in Abacus. And I want to kind of point out a quick access to the dashboard, one click down here in the toolbar. The dashboard is something that I like to get to toward the end of these types of discussions, because the dashboard builds on the concept of Abacus as a true comprehensive case management system, meaning your calendar and your contacts and your case files and documents and emails and invoices and all the accounting, all that information that you're tracking is handy in one system, meaning it's handy, it's accessible and nicely organized for everyone in the firm who may need it. The reality is, on a day-to-day basis, on an individual get things done perspective, the dashboard provides that individual with a focused view of information of whatever type being stored across the board in Abacus. It can be tailored so that the layout presents to that individual their tasks in priority order, or their deadlines, or the cases, let's say, that are nearing a deadline or even a milestone. What it does is it focuses that information, so I no longer need to go to the Abacus system and access a case, get its information, move to the next case, and so on. That information is stored and managed for me. The dashboard becomes a way where the information is pulled and presented to me in a meaningful way. So I recommend, individual users or a firm that has, departments or even roles, personnel that maybe have specific roles and responsibilities. Creating a dashboard layout that provides those individuals with the information that they need in a nicely organized kind of a fashion, where being able to bill for them and mark things done and prioritize, the dashboard becomes a very effective way to get that information in a focused and accessible way, whether it's to enhance productivity or give quick access to training videos if you're new to the program or you're bringing on new staff or want to learn new functions or features. But the Abacus dashboard is a very good way to configure what you're viewing at any given time and be able to very quickly jump to the records that are most important, like because you're working on them or you're focusing on them this week, or having aggregate totals like billable time or dollars broken out by timekeeper, or clients by referral source. The dashboard becomes a flexible way to view information in kind of priority order for productivity, or gaining insight by being able to kind of aggregate information and present it in chart form. This is helpful when you're making comparisons or looking for either gaps or either consistencies or inconsistencies with the way things are handled in the program. I did want to touch on the dashboard. The dashboard does have its help section. We do have training videos, and it becomes I think a very effective way if we're thinking about tips and tweaks to get the most out of Abacus. The dashboard really is a way to get a priority or focused view of information stored in the system that is pertinent to you as a user of the system based on your role, your responsibility, and really your kind of priority. So with that, maybe we'll handle some questions that might have come in during the training, or during our tips and tricks session. The first one came in, has to do with notifications in the system and whether individuals can kind of be notified. That's a good question. So there are a number of different ways of having notifications. Some of the ways, and let's focus on the calendar specifically. There is, first thing I'll touch on maybe is message slips. Message slips is the instant message tool that is part of Abacus. You can use that to send information, send notifications and things like that. That's more for kind of a messaging perspective if you want to give a heads up that somebody had called or somebody's online or is waiting for a response. That's one thing I'll touch on, message slips. The second one I want to touch on is the calendar notification. This is a relatively new feature of Abacus, but I think it's core to the functionality of the system in that you can have Abacus proactively notify you if an event of a certain type has been added to the program, right, to your calendar, or if an event that you are aware of has been rescheduled. I think that can become extremely important because, with mobility and a lot of, attorneys spending time outside of the office, the ability for the program to notify you via email or via text message is now built into the system. I like it because whether you're looking at your smartphone or you're looking at your Abacus calendar or you're in Outlook, all those different kind of ways of accessing real-time information, and then having the next layer be, should any of that information be changed, you kind of receiving push notification. I think that's an exceptional way to make sure that you're never out of the loop of information that's either newly added or that has been modified. So text and email notifications are a nice way to make sure that you are aware of any changes. And I actually like the aspect of it in that I can control which types of notifications I receive. I don't want to be notified every time something is added to the calendar. Instead, I can, using queries, which are in filters in Abacus, establish the criteria that would then trigger those notifications. So maybe reschedules of activities that have me out of the office, where the where code is not, local, or a deposition or some other kind of activity that requires preparation or other activities, or other actions, I should say. That's an important component of the system. Another thing, if we're on kind of the concept of notifications, the ability to notify or have Abacus notify a client of an upcoming appointment. Abacus has a nice function where client kind of automated emails the evening before, or the day before, let's say, a client is scheduled to appear in the office. Abacus now also has a notification system. This may be going outside the question, but not only intra-firm communications and notifications are supported, but also the ability to send a nice gentle reminder via email to your client. That's also available now in the system as far as notification go. Another question that came up that I wanted to touch on is the ability, let's see, how can I print out tips of the day? It's a good question. In the program, maybe I'm kind of circling back to the help menu, but the tips of the day are handy. You can also access them outside of the first time you initiate them in Abacus. The tips of the day are presented to you. There's that question mark that helped me kind of come to the tips of the day. They are available in the help guide, and printing them or saving them off as a PDF is probably your best bet. So the tip of the day can get you to the help file, and then once you're in the help file, any of the pages that you view and any information in here is yours to kind of print, and of course you can move backwards and forwards. This can become a nice way to kind of move through the program, learning as you go, or using index or search, jumping to the exact point in that help file that's most important to you. And then of course there's that print button that's helpful and available at any time. Okay. The next question that came up, and I think this is an important one, it has to do with whether Abacus can synchronize with Outlook, right? Because some attorneys are familiar with Outlook, or they're in their inbox a lot, so moving to the calendar is, it feels like an efficient way to manage both time and information. The short answer to that is yes. You can synchronize, and I'm going to my File, Synchronize menu here, and then Outlook Sync. So the setup of Outlook Sync allows you to do a number of different things. One, I can enable it with a checkbox. Two, I can control how often the sync happens. The good thing is I set this up once, it runs behind the scenes. I don't need to go in and click a sync button. It happens based on my the time frame that I've scheduled. then also kind of the second part of that question, one, does it integrate or does it sync? The short answer is yes. The next part of it was, does it synchronize more than just the calendar? Can I do contacts and the calendar? And the answer to that is a yes as well. So when I come into the Outlook integration, I can set up the sync, whether I want it to be 2 ways or 1 way, but the names is how I can synchronize my contacts between the programs. And by synchronization, here's an example. So should I enter an email address in Abacus? That was new. Or I update their cell phone number in Outlook. Synchronization, if I have it set up to synchronize, 1, and 2, have a bidirectional sync, it means that new information entered in Abacus will also be available in Outlook the next, the seconds after the next sync, and vice versa. So if I'm in Outlook and I update a contact, it can then work its way back to Abacus. So that sync, that two-way sync, is a very nice way from a contacts perspective to make sure that in Abacus it's up to date, and then of course on the in Outlook, and then with Exchange backend through that to your phone, you have access both in your phone's contacts, in your Outlook contact, and then of course in the Abacus name record for that contact. And maybe just to wrap that up, events as well. 1 way, 2 way, you can kind of determine how you want events, calendar events to sync. And then kind of going on that notifications, you also have the capability to determine which type of events are synchronized. And some of the things that we work with clients to do is to maybe remove events that are marked done or secondary reminders. So if you don't want everything to sync, you do have kind of granular ways of determining exactly which events go over, which events come back, and also kind of making sure that you're not either cluttering, one calendar, or you're being overwhelmed by the number of messages. And what I'm really thinking in that scenario is your smartphone. So on that, that small screen, I do want to see just my appointments, let's say, and just my tasks, but maybe not reminders. So you let us know, and there are controls within the Abacus kind of sync utility to really fine-tune how the sync works, how often it happens, what information is synced, and does it go 1 way or both ways. Okay, and we've reached the 10:35 mark, so I think that's the natural point to wrap up our webinar for today. I truly appreciate, 1, your patience, and I hope the information was helpful. I'd love to hear some feedback, and I also welcome you to attend next week's webinar, where we'll cover other information. You'll receive an email that would help you sign up and register for that. And oftentimes, as you've seen today, your input, your questions drive exactly some of the content that we cover in these sessions. So never hesitate to raise your hand figuratively. Let us know what's most important to you now. What are the pressing concerns, and our goal is to make sure we get you that information. All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it, and I look forward to next time.